And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast for our Raising Awareness project. My name's Levy.
I'm Jessica.
I'm Shay.
I'm Chloe.
I'm Yesenia.
Alrighty, welcome. And we are all liberal studies majors at California State University of Long Beach. And today we're going to be talking about the school to prison pipeline. Now, what is the school to prison pipeline? According to the American Journal of Criminal Justice in August 2017, the school to prison pipeline refers to the growing pattern of tracking students out of the educational institutions and tracking them directly into the juvenile and adult criminal justice system. Basically, it's just kids graduating school or not even graduating school, dropping out and going straight to being incarcerated. Today, we're going to be going over the problems, the causes, and the solutions of the school to prison pipeline. So we introduced the school to prison pipeline. The problem is the school to prison pipeline. Now, why is the school to prison pipeline happening? From our research, we've seen that excessive discipline has a major effect on students and also the lack of teachers of color. Excessive disciplining can mean suspensions, expulsions, and detentions. All of which
specifically for the reasons that are like you said, excessive, like they get involved if like police get involved, like if a student just makes a threat, or if they're out of uniform too many times, or if they're tardy. That's like kind of like the more extensive, rather than their white fellow classmates, they don't receive the same disciplinary actions.
So from our research, we've seen that students of color are mainly affected by this excessive discipline, and this can be due to their teachers' unconscious bias or even just racism in general in their school administration. And what we mean by excessive suspensions or detentions or expulsions, we mean, again, what Jessica said, for little reasons, students of color are being suspended from school, or they're being expelled at the extreme, or they're given detentions.
Well, like you guys were saying, how they would be targeted excessively more. Like it ranges from like minor to moderate offenses compared to the extreme offenses would be like gun violence or drugs, while they would be targeted for like you guys said earlier, tardiness, or maybe like disrupting the classroom. Like even those actions would result in suspension.
Would an example be like, for example, like when I was in middle school, it was me and this white student that sat next to me. I was the one punished for being disruptive to the classroom, for the white student dropping their phone, laughing about it, but I was the one who got punished for it. And then they sent an administrator to come talk to me after school with the teacher, telling me that I shouldn't be disrupting the class. And the teacher himself was like, "You're a waste of space in my classroom." And then they were like, "If you don't like behave, then we're gonna have to take other measures into like discipline, basically discipline and lead to suspension or something like that." Yeah. And like to kind of give more like background info, like I don't know if you mind like me asking, like, can you describe like how you were as a student? Because I know when I would read some accounts, while researching, they would say like they were really like an okay student, like a good student, and they just had like like just one incident, and that just caused like a chain reaction right after. Do you mind like describing like, oh, were you a quiet student, and then like that happened and that kind of like caught you off guard, and you knew based off of that like that was either like racism or like some type of prejudice against you? Oh yeah, I could describe that too, because like I was a good student in middle school. Like I wouldn't get in trouble or anything. Like that was like the first time I ever got called out like that in the classroom. So it's kind of like, what did I do? Like I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, see, like I noticed that was like a kind of trend that they would get called out like with extreme force. Like I feel like bringing an administrator out was kind of like excessive. Like it couldn't be dealt with, just by a simple classroom teacher, but they had to bring out more force just to like prove a point or get their, you know, really just jam right in there. And yeah, I understood like that. I noticed that throughout research as well, and I that was a good point too.
Yeah, I think like fast forward into our conversation, like how your teacher assumed that it was you to disrupt the class. I think that's like showing their bias. Like they would assume that a student of color would be more disruptive than a white student. And so by her just assuming that you were the one being disruptive was like a clear sign of how she uses her own opinions to affect like how her own opinions affect the classroom and her teaching style.
And I also wanted to add that the way that they handled the situation, it basically just was me meeting them after class. I went to that teacher's classroom after school, and they had called the seventh grade administrator to talk to me. So they sat down and like talked to me, saying that I wasn't there to go to school to disrupt the classroom, that I should be paying attention, being an active listener to the lesson that the teacher was giving. And I just didn't think it was fair because I wasn't on my phone, which they had accused me of. My phone was put away and I was just trying to pay attention, but the white student next to me was the one being disruptive, but I was the one to blame for that. And they didn't even bother to discipline that student either. They just kind of like waved it off and only spoke to me after class. And then they were basically, and then they told me that if I were to continue being an issue to the classroom and disrupting and or even doing something worse, that they were going to take other measures, which was basically to call my parents over for a meeting, and then it would lead to a suspension if things got out of hand.
Okay, I had a couple questions for you. So I was curious, how did it affect the way that you viewed the school? Like, did it discourage you, or like, um, how did it affect you when you like came into the classroom to like do work or like just be around with your classmates and stuff?
I think because of that instance, that situation, my views on that specific class and that teacher, but also the school itself as a whole changed, because it just made me realize that the way I was being punished and how me being a person of color played a role into that, since that the white student that was being the one since the white student that was the one disrupting the classroom was the one to blame for it. But I saw that because I was a student of color, I saw that I was the one being punished even more for it. And it changed my views, because whenever I walked into that classroom for the rest of that year, I just kind of I stopped caring about the class, and I just kind of grew a resentment toward the teacher, since the words that they told me that meeting that we had after school, it kind of like stayed with me forever. And like even now, like since it was a math course, and like that the words that they told me, which was "you're a waste of space" in my classroom, that has stuck with me up until now, my second year of college, and I have not enjoyed any math course since then. So now I'm like kind of like associate that situation with my math course.
Yesenia, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I mean, obviously you didn't deserve that, and your feelings are totally valid for not being encouraged or motivated to go to school. And I'm really happy that you're here in this like space with us, and that you pushed through and you didn't really let what the heart and you didn't really let what the teacher said to you, or like the school administration like did to you, like affect you. Because I mean, obviously you're succeeding, you're at Cal State Long Beach, and like I'm really sorry that happened to you. But thank you so much for your input, and like for giving us a firsthand example on how an unconscious bias action that a teacher can, you know, give to you, or like a reaction that they can give to you, how it can affect you personally.
Yeah, like I was kind of piggyback off of that, but I I noticed like I kind of saw like a trend, you know, like these situations would happen to students. I'm glad that, like Levi said, like Isana, you didn't let it get to you, because like there's like a domino effect. Like if something happens to these kids, they know like, oh, like it just breaks your spirit of wanting to go to school, like wanting to do well in another math course. You kind of get like almost like you kind of protect yourself. Thus, like, you don't really want to like do like you don't really want to try anymore. So like I was reading like other accounts where they were like their spirit was broken, thus it caused them to do bad, and then they did bad, and then they dropped out, and then they just like kind of like filled in those stereotypes that were like kind of put on them, like that, kind of just like were pushed on them. And like it's just it's tough because it's just like a continuous like cycle. And I'm glad that you kind of just stick to yourself and you kind of just continue to push through, because you are here at the university, and you kind of just didn't let it get the best of you.
Yeah, and just to kind of go off on that again, um, like with the trend that you said you noticed when we were researching this, like back then when it was still very like recent, I kind of like saw myself almost falling into that, like to fit that stereotype, and wanting like to just not go to school anymore and just completely give up. I remember after eighth grade promotion, it was still kind of like raw for me what that teacher said to me. So I was like, after eighth grade, I don't want to go. I didn't want to go to high school. I just didn't want to face that again with any other courses. But I was like, I can't do this. Like, I need to break the stereotype.
Yeah, I could imagine how it would be hard to stay motivated when it feels like the school system that's supposed to uplift you is putting you down. It's they're it's their form of bullying. Instead of like kid on kid crime, it's the adults taking advantage of the situation and using their power to belittle you, which again, that like is it's not okay. And like this is why we're recording this podcast, is to raise awareness and to show people what students go through day to day, and how it can be kind of like brushed under the rug, or it's not talked enough. And so like that's why we're making the podcast. So thank you, Usenia, again for telling us your story, because I mean, prior to this, I don't think any of us knew this. So it was news to all of us. So we took a little break. As you can see, I turned on the lights, but we just discussed the problems of excessive disciplining and how teachers' unconscious bias can affect students directly. And now we're going to be talking about the solutions of these things. Does anyone want to introduce it?
Okay, so I'll start off. I think one solution would be that schools can provide some kind of program so that instead of um, when they get suspended or expelled, like going home, they can still learn, but in a different environment. Because after a student gets expelled or suspended for a certain amount of days, the students can see that as maybe like a vacation, because all they get to do is stay at home and they don't like learn or anything, and there's no one to like teach them what they're doing wrong. um but if these schools like provided programs, they can like they'll still be going to school, they'll just be like learning in a different environment. um yeah.
Yeah, kind of more like of a redirection instead of like a punishment, I think is kind of, like more appropriate, because they're never, like you said, they're never going to learn if you kind of just punish them. It's like, why, like how do you kind of want to teach them like how to move forward in a way.
So now we just talked about how excessive disciplining, again, how it directly affects students and how teachers' unconscious bias can negatively affect students. We wanted to include someone who's actively in the field right now, because there's only so much that we can say just based off of research. So we wanted to ask my teacher from high school, Jason Chang, but unfortunately he couldn't make it today, but he still answered my questions. What I asked him was, What, as an educator, can you do to stop the school to prison pipeline? Have you seen trends in students that are susceptible to fall into the pattern? Is there anything that the school system can do to prevent the cycle? His answer to the first question was sustained unconscious bias training. I don't mean here's a one-day workshop and suddenly racism is not relevant. Legit, I had a student the other week who got suspended for jokingly saying to a teacher, "You better watch your back going to your car." Question is, did the teacher really feel threatened or did they act upon their unconscious bias for judging a student for being threatening because of the way they look or act? For that student, if he said to me, I would have said, "Really now?" But perhaps I'm a male, so that's a factor. Schools really need to evaluate how they discipline students, but also to a degree where this teacher also feels safe. There's a balance. Schools need more social workers and mental health professionals. If a student is acting up, why are they acting up? Some teachers and students are quick to judge by going, "Oh, they're that way because insert race." 2, answering my second question. Black and brown students, they're generally the targets of some teachers for discipline issues, whereas if a white or Asian student does the same thing, it's somehow different. Again, not all teachers, but that's for teachers who don't realize their unconscious bias, and also the quality of home life. It's harder now since discipline issues are through the roof because of COVID, so it's not just a black/brown issue, but also socioeconomic and home. And it's legit putting a huge stress on teachers too. My third question, his answer was, it's not just the damn school system. It needs to be a community effort. The school system is not the cure all. It can be the start, but it can't be the sole player. Like how many times has it happened that when a student acts up, you tell a parent and the parent goes, "Well, they're not like that at home." But for sure, we need to focus on more social workers and mental health professionals, less police on campus. Personally, I'm in favor of in-house suspensions than suspensions. Suspensions don't work. Some students see it as a quote unquote reward. And the more they are suspended, the more they miss from school and the further they fall behind, which contributes to the pipeline. So yeah, that is what Mr. Jason Chang said, added to this. Follow him on Instagram, Chang the World. He's a great teacher. But I agree with everything that he said. I think the school system has been puts a lot has a lot of pressure put on them to quote unquote fix the students. But again, it starts with the home and like how they're raised at home and like their, home life and their community. It affects how they are at school a lot of the times. And I think this is where teachers can apply like funds of knowledge. We talked about this in class. There's an article about it. Like funds of knowledge is basically teachers talking to the students' parents and getting to know the students and where they came from so that the teachers can effectively teach their students and having a stronger connection than just teacher-student classroom connection. And I think this is where it can play out and how it can fix the problem of where students are lashing out at school. And again, like this all contributes to the school to prison pipeline. I mean, home life, how they're treated at school, unconscious bias, motivation, this all relates to the school to prison pipeline. Just because if students are feeling motivated, they're more likely to drop out. And if they're actively being suspended, it kind of like puts the idea in their head that they're meant to be in detentions or they're meant to be in trouble, which again feeds into the school to prison pipeline. Does anyone have anything to say about what Mr. Chang said?
Yeah, I actually want to add something. I kind of like really agree with like the last statement of like hiring more professionals, like mental health professionals. Because I remember like in high school, I I didn't know we had a school psychologist till about like late junior year, and I still didn't even know her name. I didn't even know she was a female. Like I didn't know her where her office was. Like, and I'm pretty sure that was like the only like outside professional we had. And but of course, I recognize like the truancy officers, like I know like all the kind of like the security, like I know them because they're just everywhere, like, and they make it known that they're there, but I just find it odd that like if students needed mental help or kind of just other resources, they were kind of like hush hush, like, oh, like they're there just to say that, oh well, we had it, kind of like throw it in our face later, type of thing. And I just feel like that shouldn't really be a thing. There should be more advocacy, more positions, more resources, and more professionals just kind of like stopping the problem rather than like preventing it. I mean, rather than like, oh well, it's too late, because I just feel like at the end of the day, it the person that's going to be blamed is the student rather than like, oh, the school, not the school because they had the resources but they weren't really given to the student, type of thing.
Yeah, and for a change like that to happen, it's not just a community-based effort surrounding the school. It would have to be like a nationwide effort to change policies within the education system within the United States.
I think another important top idea that he brought up was less police on campus. With more police on campus, it kind of makes it feel like a jail, I feel like, in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very symbolic in a way, kind of.
yeah, like kids are used to, being around like police officers, and then also like seeing police officers on campus every single day can negatively affect the students and make it seem like that the place that they're in is like dangerous, or that they need to like watch their back. I mean, I know I haven't had many encounters with police day to day, but on campus, I mean, when I was in high school, I was with them every single day. And I remember one time I had pepper spray, me being a woman, I want to protect myself just in case hopefully I don't ever get in that situation, but I'm a woman, so I want to be prepared if something were to ever happen like that. So I had pepper spray on my keychain, and like you're not supposed to have like weapons on campus, obviously. And it was just my fault. I was walking to my car to get a skillet to make pancakes for my club, like something super harmless. And I was walking to my car and I was stopped by the police on campus, and then also my like the associate principal. And like my associate principal was really nice about it. He was just like, hey, like you can't have that on campus, blah blah blah, like I'm gonna have to take it away from you just like for now. And if it was just left at that, it would have been totally fine. I would have understood the situation. But the police on campus was there, and he accused me of going to places that I shouldn't be going to because I had pepper spray. And after that incident, I almost had a panic attack because I wasn't used to, being accused of something like that. And
Yeah, it like caught
it
you off
made
guard.
yeah, it made me feel unsafe in my own environment because somebody was accusing me of being the bad person, I guess. And like police on campus are supposed to make you feel safe. They're supposed to build a safer environment. But after that incident, the more police I saw on campus, the more unmotivated I got. It made me it made me want to like lash out. Like I'm going to be honest. After that, I started talking back because I was mad. And that's not like me. I'm just like, okay, yeah, go ahead, like take it, And after this incident, it just made me feel really unmotivated and kind of mad at my school. Fortunately, I had other resources on campus, like again, like what Jessica was saying, how like the more resources on campus, it can positively affect students. I had a student family center at school, and I had one counselor who helped me throughout my all of high school with my anxiety and stuff like that. And like even with that incident, it kind of like raised my anxiety a little bit in that time period, and he was there to like help me. And like I think maybe if he wasn't there, I wouldn't have had the same high school experience that I did. And that can relate back to all other students in different situations. And that can mean suspensions, expulsions, detentions. Again, like when a student gets in trouble, why did they get in trouble? Why are they doing this? And that's when the student family center can come in, or that's when counselors can come in, and that's when, you know, therapists can come in. Those resources to kids where they allow a safe space for them to talk out their feelings and like kind of analyze their actions can really be beneficial to them, because they're seeing it from a person that actually cares for them. And a lot of these students don't see that in the classroom, or they don't see it at home. They don't see adults caring for them. So having that resource where they can go to somewhere to have people care for them is really important, and it can help combat that school to prison pipeline.
Yeah, like oh, I'm sorry. So like how students are like being targeted, or like how you were targeted in that moment, it's kind of like when students of color are constantly targeted by either campus police or teachers or like other educators within the school system. It makes them like you said, like it makes them want to lash out. It's like, why try to be a good student if I'm always going to be viewed bad? So we might as well just do what they think we're going to do.
Might
And
as well give them a reason. Yeah.
yeah, like might as well act out, because regardless of if they try to act good, they're going to be targeted for being a bad student because of the way they look.
Yeah, and it kind of changes your like perception like of like school officers. Like, are you here to protect me from the outside world, or are you here to protect the outside world from us? You know, it's like kind of like, what is your purpose, you know, really?
And then also workshops teach to help teachers combat their unconscious bias in the classroom. Workshops is needed, trainings are needed, like what Mr. Chang said, not just a one-stop shop where you're just like, okay, here, don't be racist, now go back to your classroom. No, we're talking about reforming the system and having in-depth workshops and trainings, and maybe like situations that can be presented to these teachers in the classroom that they can relate back, you know, into their day-to-day life, and how to just to help them combat this unconscious bias, so they're not overly disciplining kids, or it helps them with their, maybe because, you know, teachers are people too, and they have lives too, so what's going on in their lives can affect, you know, how they teach their students and how they treat their students. And unfortunately, like, that is a problem, but it shouldn't happen. And these workshops can help them combat their anger or their frustrations, and instead of like lashing out on the students and disciplining them, suspending them, giving them detentions, also giving the teachers resources to help these students understand what they're doing wrong. So it's kind of like reforming the way that, you know, students are disciplined, but also reforming the system, reforming the community. It all plays together.
And I think workshops do for the students as well, because at some point when they're constantly feeling targeted, they're going to feel unmotivated or feeling less than. So I think workshops for students, like between the teachers and students, would also help to create that bonded understanding, because just like the students, like they're humans too, the teachers are humans too. There also needs to be like a common ground of like them understanding each other, where they come from.
And I mean, I think also, I coming from a person, because, like, you know, I just got out of high school, so I I can't like really like, I still talk to kids that are in high school, and like I can't really say, oh, like if they had these resources things would change, but I think it's also like really important for the students to be held accountable too. And like, you know, and I think we've been talking a lot about how like the school system needs to change, the system needs this, that, whatever, teachers need to change this, that, but it's really important for the students to also be held accountable for their actions. And this can be through counseling, and this can be through, you know, therapy, this can be through the teachers talking to them and stuff like that.
Yeah, because students can also have their own biases. Because I remember for me going into a classroom and I saw a white teacher during around like 2017, you know, with presidential elections and stuff. Whenever I saw like I had a white teacher, like immediately in my head I was like, oh, that's a racist person. Even though like that might not be the case, but in my head, that was what was going on. And of course, my actions, which or like my beliefs or own opinions, would show through my actions or interactions with the teacher, which would have like a negative impact between like our relationship.
Like the part where you were talking about maybe about the workshops and all, I really agree with having the workshops because like since we're students right now like taking these courses, like it's fresh in our minds, but once we're like in the classroom and like as time passes by, for many like it's forgotten, like it's thrown out the window, all the information that we're learning right now. And so that's why I think like it's really important to have those workshops to like refresh your mind about it, and also like for the students to be held accountable, like if there were like a workshop for both teachers and students to be able to interact with one another about these topics.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think workshops on both sides for students and teachers can be very beneficial for everyone in, the school system, because it's a two-way street. It's students and teachers and school administration. I kind of just want to throw my 2 cents in, and I think hiring and retaining teachers of color is also a big factor. When a student of color has a teacher of color, they're more likely to be motivated to learn, just because they can relate to their teacher on a different level. Obviously, we're grateful for all our white teachers, but there's only so much a white teacher can understand and connect to the struggles of a student of color. And even teachers of color are discriminated in their workforce, and they tend to not stay in one school. So I think it's really important to retain them, because if they're moving from school to school, students of color are left to feel abandoned, or like, again, if their teacher of color moves and they get a white teacher of color, they're discouraged, and they're unmotivated to learn. They feel abandoned. They feel just all of the above, just everything like that. So I think also retaining and hiring teachers of color is a very important factor to help combat the school to prison pipeline. Because I think the whole thing about the school to prison pipeline is making sure that the students have a good experience in school, and that they're learning so that they stay in school, and that they're motivated and encouraged to learn, and that they feel safe in their environment. Because if they're not, then they're more likely to drop out, or
I think that's one of, oh,
rated.
sorry. I was gonna say, I think that's one of the most important things when a teacher of color is in the classroom, a student feels safer. And that's what kind of like Bettina, what she was saying in her book about home place. I feel like home place is really like there when a teacher of color is there, because that student can like you said, like they can understand like where a student may be coming from, and like what they might be going on like at their like in their family, like in their family or their home. Like they can kind of understand and then really reinforce and like pave a way for their classroom to be that home place for students where they can thrive in.
I just want to throw in one little quote about suspensions and like students and stuff, and then after that we'll be done. The quote is, according to Youth Violence and Juvenile Justice in 2020, among those who never experienced a suspension during grades 7 through 12, less than 1% were incarcerated during any given year. At 18, about 2.5% of the ever suspended sample reported being incarcerated, and this share peaked to 4.5% at age 26. This statistic shows that when a student is suspended, they're more likely to go to prison. And this is what we're trying to decrease the statistic. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for. So if teachers and school administration can work together to find different ways to discipline students rather than like out of school suspensions, I think that can really help combat the school to prison pipeline.
Yep.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you for listening to our podcast. I hope you learned something. Share with your friends, share with your family, share with your teachers, share with your peers. This is kind of the whole, reason for our project. We want to raise awareness because, it starts with the kids. It really starts with the kids. And, you know,
The youth is our next generation.
exactly, exactly. And we want to build a strong society. And we just wanted to raise awareness on the school to prison pipeline because, you know, it's important. We want to keep, you know, kids in school and kids motivated and everything like that. Alrighty. Thank you. Peace out.
Bye.